and welcome to Elvenhome and to this week's episode, which really concentrates on how I went about doing some scenic work still up at Grey Havens, which you may have seen in the last edition if you were sharp-eyed, but which I didn't talk about at the time. So what I'm going to do is take you now to look at the area which I was doing the scenic work on before giving you a chance to see me actually doing the work and then showing you the materials that I used. And at the end of the video there is the reveal of the town plan of High Elven, or rather the village plan of High Elven. And I talk a little bit about my plans for building the village and the buildings that will go into it. So let's get on now and go back to Grey Havens and the scenic work that I've just mentioned. First of all, I hope you'll forgive me. I'm holding this by hand in order to be able to get it into the areas that I need, so this may be a bit bumpier than normal. In the last video, you may have noticed when I was doing the work on the church at Grey Havens that all of this area in front, at the very front, had suddenly had scenic material appear in it. Now, I didn't mention it in the last video because although I have recorded the work to create this area, it was too long for the last video, so I thought I'd save it for this one. What I'm going to do now is take you to the speeded up version of me creating this whole area here and creating the doing the scenic work, not creating the bushes, doing the scenic work. Once I've played the next section, I'll then just show you some of the materials that I use, none of which are extraordinary, to create this effect and complete the work at what is the top of the clip face. So I'll take you now to where I was about a fortnight ago working on this scenic work. Well, now that you've seen the creation of that effect at the top of the hill there, I thought I'd show you the things that I used to create that effect, and they're all in front of you. The first thing that I did, which I didn't do on screen, but you saw me putting the glue on top of it, was to cover it in PVA, and then this stuff, which is Javis earth, Engage earth, which I've used in a number of places. It's really good for giving an effect underneath grass rather than going straight to the bare board. You can go to straight bare board, but I like putting this stuff on top, and it seems to work quite well. That has to be allowed completely to dry. So the grass went on the day before you saw me doing the work of putting the static grass on top, because you want the PVA underneath completely dry before you start putting more PVA on top, or the Pico static grass glue, which is what I was using there. For the static grass, the first thing that it was covered in is this, which is a mixture that I've used quite a bit of 1mm spring, 2mm spring, and 2mm summer. And I find that gives a nice variation in colour, so that you don't get all the grass looking just one colour, because very few lawns have only one colour of green in them if you look hard enough. So the first thing that onto the earth was the static grass. That doesn't need to dry too quickly. I then use some of the Pico Scenic spray glue that you can get. You saw me putting it on with the paper to stop it going onto the fencing, because of course if the glue goes onto the fencing, so does the static grass. And then on top of that, a little bit from the puffer bottle of this stuff, which if I put it around that way and get the light out of the way, is 4mm patchy grass. Not too much of this, because of course 4mm in Engage is 2 foot. And that, when I was talking to the Pico guy at Waverley a couple of years ago, he was saying the 4mm is about as big as you want on Engage, unless you're going for a particular look. But remembering that's 2 foot high, which is quite a high piece of grass. Once that was on there, the next thing I tend to use is lump foliage or clump foliage. I've seen both names, and I always use 3 colours, which is dark green, mid green, and olive green. And I like to mix those up to try and break up, again it's this thing of trying to break up the colour so that you get variation in colour and making it look as though it's more naturally grown than if you use all of one kind. I put that in, some of that. I didn't do all the bush in the first time until such point as I was happy that I'd got the main structure. And then I started working on the underbrush, and I'll come back to the work that was done to create the really overgrown brambly corner. But the underbrush, if I get the right box, is sitting in here. This is simply Woodland Scenic underbrush. Again, it's 2 colours, it's mid green and olive green. And I've found that if I mix it together in those colours and then put some in my hand and essentially roll it into a sausage, and then stick that in, it will all break up as you put it down, so you won't just have sausages everywhere. And I find that it gives, it just breaks up quite naturally, and it stops me from selectively putting different colours in, if you see what I mean. I let chance take over, which probably gives a more natural look to it than if I thought about where did each bit of colour go. Under the trees, I wanted it to be more built up and brambly, and I had some of this left over, which was from the hedging around the War Memorial, which you may recall when you saw me do it, is rubberized horsehair, which I sprayed, I think, with hairspray. I'm pretty certain it was with hairspray, and then put some Gauge Master, I think, leaf foliage over it to create my hedge. So I tore some of this off, because if you look at the bare rubberized horsehair, which is here, and it comes in a long thick pack which will last me forever, you can see the brambly effect of it, and you can tease this open if you want. Well, even there, if I go to that piece there, you can see how that's open structured there. So I took some of this and tore it apart to give me the kind of brambly effect that was under the tree, and I'll see if at this point I can put a piece of film where I was taking the camera along to have a look at that area more closely. And that's the combined materials that we used to create that effect. And I've used them obviously up the incline, and if I just move this camera here, you can see where the hillside is. That's all created in the same way, basically, using these materials. Less so static grass if it's right on the edging. And it will be these sorts of materials that are going to create this area of High Elven. So if you give me a moment to get rid of all this stuff, the next thing is the reveal of the town plan of High Elven. Hello, and welcome to another episode of 2 to Watch, where I showcase 2 other engaged YouTube channels that I enjoy following. The first channel in this episode is one that I've not been following very long. Indeed, it's only been operating since October 2019. That is Great Deltan. I started subscribing about a month or 2 ago, and this may be the first layout I've mentioned, I think, where I don't know the name of the YouTuber. On the About page of the channel, he explains that Great Deltan is a modern-era N-gauge layout, which is currently being built in his shed. The layout features 3 running lines making up a circle of track around a central operator well, featuring 2 stations, country scene, urban scene, and a few other bits and pieces. He says that he will be keeping video updates on his progress, and that he will be posting some running session videos. He also says that he won't be posting how-to tutorials, as he's only a beginner and has a lot to learn before teaching others, but that all comments and bits of advice will be welcomed. I've been really impressed by the quality of the work on this layout in the short time I've been watching. The scenic work is really very good and very lifelike. I was particularly impressed in a recent episode as he built a signal gantry to go across his 3 running lines, with 2 aspect lighting across the 3 tracks. The finished result, which combines a number of kits for the gantries, ladders and walkways, looked very effective, and I'm really enjoying watching the development of this layout and catching up on the work that's been done so far, and I think he'll get a lot by going along and subscribing to his channel. The other channel that I'm mentioning today is Paul Sheedy's channel, Wickford N-Gauge Model Railway. Paul lives in Ireland, County Wicklow, and Wickford is a fictional location somewhere in South Devon. It's a junction station between the Great Western and Southern regions. His rolling stock is from the early 60s to the present day, and he hopes that there is something to keep people coming back. Well, there certainly has been for me since I subscribed to the channel. His videos are mainly running sessions. As you watch them, you can see the development of the layout over time. Each of the videos is really well put together. They must take quite a while to do in order to complete all the filming and then edit them. Paul really has superb scenic skills. One of his stations is Paulish, which runs along the shore and is plainly based on Dawlish in Devon. When you look at the beach and the ocean, it really does look very lifelike. The blending of the scenic work to get the back, middle and foreground to work together are just simply brilliant. The camera angles leave you thinking at times the layout extends a long way into the distance. I'm really enjoying each of the videos when they are uploaded. They're not very long, around 5 or 6 minutes, so time to be able to sit back and enjoy the views with a cup of something as you watch the trains run by. This channel is worth subscribing to if you haven't already, to enjoy both the craftsmanship of the modelling and the expertise in putting together the videos. So that is 2 to Watch for this episode. As ever, the links to the 2 channels will be in the description below this video. You may recall that a couple of videos ago I started talking about what I wanted to do in this whole area, and in particular how I hadn't really got in my head what the plan of High Elven, the village, looked like. And as ever, the comments were really helpful as people came back and gave their thoughts on what I might want to do up here. Chris Carter suggested perhaps a cricket pitch, which I have been tempted to put on the layout, except I know how big a cricket pitch needs to be, and I rather fear that wherever we put the cricket pitch on here, it would have to be a rule of 6 and out as you knocked it off the edge of the High Elven and brained somebody sitting on the trains below. John Feeney said, well, maybe a Lord of the Rings inspired castle, which is not impossible. Tony Hancock said that there definitely had to be a pub. I think he was thinking more down in this corner. Tony Walton said, how about thinking of a mining village? And that was certainly closer to what was in my mind, because as some of you will know, High Elven was originally in my mind a chocolate boxy, lovely little village with a green, and indeed the Metcalfe Church that you saw me take out was originally intended to sit up at High Elven. David Auger suggested, how about thinking that essentially you use Station Road to be this area is the village going off the side of the scenery, and you put all this to largely be a hillside and blending obviously down to the level below, which is something I've yet to work out how I'm going to do, though the ideas are growing on me. And all of that went into the melting pot and eventually allowed me to come up with a plan. I'll just push this down a bit, which is an amalgam of them all. So you can see here, this is essentially the railway coming across to the station, the engine shed and the goods shed. There's Station Road going down, and the road then carries round, and in my mind, though this is not drawn to scale, it then branches into 3, and here you have some small dwellings which are more workers' cottages, similar probably, not necessarily in design, but in size to those you find in Station Road. Because I don't see this as having been a particularly well-to-do area. It's where the farm workers would be, and I think it's more likely farm workers than mining, but that idea. But the beauty is it will give me plenty of space, and that's what I want, to make this largely a scenic area. So there's a big thwack of green, if you like, in this part of the layout as well, which will also give me an opportunity to do more gardens or rough areas. So coming round, the first area about here somewhere is going to be, possibly I'll put a hill in there because this is all one level at the moment, that needs breaking up, with some trees and shrubs before we come to a rough area beside the pub. And there has to be a pub, and I've come up with a design for the pub, though by accident, and I'll explain that in just a moment, which will have something of a lawn at the back, possibly a vegetable patch and a shed. There'll be a long fence as the boundary between the railway and the open areas here. And then the road carries on, splits into 2 main arteries with a little one that comes up here, just to bring me to a number of small dwellings. Now on here I think I've got 9. Just at the moment I haven't got in my head the design for those properties. But I'll come on, I started doing a design and it went wrong, but rather happily as it turned out. Going up to an area here, which is going to be a raised mound, which was once the site of a castle. Whether I go so far as to buy some of the kits that have castle ruins, I don't know. I'll see, because I think something that just suggests the sort of earthworks left after all the walls had been robbed out, probably robbed out to help build some of these cottages, because these are very old, these cottages. They predate the railway, they predate Station Road, so that's why I haven't yet quite got my head around what they will look like. Yes, possibly a design. When we were on holiday after I retired, we went down to South Uist and we stayed in a crofter's cottage which was of some age. Very thick walls to keep the heat in, 1 story, And that's what's in my mind, but I haven't yet settled on the design, which I will do. Now, coming back to the pub, when I was trying to design the houses, I was looking for a mining village or farm workers village, and it came up with a place called Booze in Yorkshire. So straight to Google Maps I went. Strangely, Booze must be one of the places in the United Kingdom to which the Google van has not yet reached. It's reached the road that almost goes to Booze, but it didn't go to Booze itself. So I was idly flicking around up the streets as you do on Google Maps, and I came across some really interesting, what must have been workers' cottages or houses. And I'll put a picture up here which shows them. I'm not quite sure where it is, but it's not far from Booze in Yorkshire. These houses are built back to back, and the adjoining wall of the semi-detached is indeed the back wall of the house. And as you'll see, they're rather elongated, with a strange shape to the back of the roof. But I thought that looked rather interesting. So going from the size of the door, I recalculated the size of things, and I came up with a size for the building, and so started to build the mock-up. And here you see the mock-up. And this is with the front door here, where it extends out to the house, so there's on 2 levels, but very thin, because that's 2 houses, so there'd be an internal wall. The only problem is that's too big. That is much too big for what I have in mind for the buildings here. But that would be just the right size for a pub, it seemed to me, because the kind of pub I have in mind here is not the sort of coaching inn. There would be no need for a coaching inn up here, but more the kind of small pub that you can get, which is really no more than an extended house, or even just a house, where the bottom half is used for the pub and the top half is used for the landlord to live in. I like this shape, though, having said that. And so what I've decided is that, yes, it is a pub, and the pub will be in the front bit. The back end is going to be where the skittle alley is going to be. Whether I actually model the skittle alley, I don't know. My wife said to me this morning, oh, that would be good. You could model the skittles. I do not intend to model 9-inch high skittles in Engage, but I thank her for the suggestion. However, what I am going to do is to build this as the pub, and the pub will sit about here on the main road, so it's close enough for the houses over here and for this little group of buildings that'll be here. And then I'll divide up the area and decide how many houses in the end I actually have, because it's very easy. These are not drawn to scale, and that could be too many. As I said, that's 9. It may be 5 or 6 is a better number, probably an odd number rather than even. For some reason that seems to look better. So that is the current design for High Elven. So with the pub sitting here, an arrangement of houses, that's probably actually sitting a bit further back, an arrangement of houses at the back going up to a mounded area which is the remnants of a castle that was there many, many years ago, but has long since been robbed out, and with very little, if any, of its walls standing. So what I'm going to do now is just try and firm up on this, and also come and agree in my mind the design for the low properties that will be sitting here. And I do want them single story, that I'm quite clear about, because I think they'll sit down nicely, and it will help with being able to put plenty of space around them, which is what I want to do. So that's the current design for High Elven, and with that brings us to the end of this episode of Elvenhome. I hope you've enjoyed the episode and you found it useful. If you have, please give it a thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't already subscribed. It'd be great to have you along. Hit the bell notification and select all so that you'll know when I'm uploading videos. And if you've got any comments, please do let me have your comments, because as you've already seen just from this episode, they do help me in trying to design and resolve how I'm going to do things. But until I speak to you again in about a fortnight's time, that's bye-bye from me. Bye-bye.